Hi, this is Taboki, and today I'm going to be doing my Top 5 Wednesday for September 28th, and the theme today is Top 5 Gateway Books for a Genre. And I thought I would do all of my gateway books around YA fantasy, because I feel like in some of my videos I talk a little bit about why I am frustrated with YA fantasy and how I kind of feel weird about that, because I think YA in general gets a lot of shit unfairly for things that are there but that are not unique to YA. I really like the genre and I read a lot of recommendations for it, and then when I read some of these books, I think for me they fall a little bit flat. Like I mentioned, it doesn't mean that YA as a genre is bad. It also doesn't mean that other genres don't have these problems. It's just a thing that I've noticed in the books that I've looked for in YA. But for today, to go more on the positive note, I thought I would recommend some of my favorite YA fantasies and, yeah, be a little bit happier. One of the things that I love about YA in general, and I think YA fantasy, is that there's so much awesome premise. Like, there's so many cool, I don't want to say cool dystopias, but there are a lot of interesting ideas for dystopias, a lot of different ideas for fantasy worlds that I think are very imaginative, and I love seeing those built out, and that's how I've gotten drawn into so many YAs. So my first gateway book for YA fantasy is Graceling by Kristin Cashore. The series that Graceling belongs to is about this world where people have different kind of graces, basically, that are, you know, like a mutant superpower in a way, but more elegantly done. And yeah, so Graceling is about this one girl and kind of her figuring out what her power is while she is, you know, saving a kingdom. And I love Kristin Cashore's books in general because I think she takes a lot of interesting angles at femininity, at relationships, at romance, at masculinity as well. And Graceling is, I think, kind of super emblematic of that. The relationship between the main character and her male companion, watching that develop is really interesting. How they kind of interact with each other and how they approach their relationship is not something that you see in a lot of books. I think she gets a lot of shit because her female characters stand up to men and maybe don't pursue relationships in a traditional way. People take that as like man-hating. Obviously, that's just people being super weak about the masculine ego. To me, at least, that's what's super obvious. I think it's a great book. It has a lot of ideas to it, a lot of really good world building. I think it's perfect if you're trying to get into YA fantasy, especially if you like books with a very feminist bent. And next up is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So Six of Crows takes place as part of her Grisha world. So I read the Grisha trilogy. Actually, the first time I read it, the first book, I wasn't crazy into it, but I saw a lot of people talking about it more, and so I finally gave the whole trilogy a shot. And I did enjoy it. The world itself is really cool. It's set in kind of this alternate Europe, but more like Eastern Europe, like more Russia. So it's very different from the usual kind of Euro-centric fantasies that you read. I did enjoy the trilogy, but it's not there were some issues with it. With Six of Crows, so even though I didn't really like the Grisha trilogy, I really love Six of Crows, and I think it's a really great gateway book because it combines a lot of the incredible world building that comes with the Grisha trilogy, like these very beautifully thought out settings and magic abilities and everything, but expands it further from what the Grisha trilogy has. Even though the Grisha trilogy has kind of all these immense worlds to it, somehow you realize reading Six of Crows that there's even more. And it also brings in a really interesting and diverse cast, and I just think at its core, it's basically a Ocean's 11-esque heist movie, but set in a magical world. And if you love that, if you like the idea of that, you'll probably love Six of Crows. Next up is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. So this is part of her Lunar Chronicles series. So the Lunar Chronicles are these kind of futuristic sci-fi fantasy retelling of fairy tales, and Cinder is the first one. It's about a cyborg named Cinder who, yeah, is kind of like Cinderella. The series is done, so if you want to read the full series, it's great because you can kind of go through all of it. I will be honest and say that while I did not enjoy the end of the series as much as the beginning, I still really am super glad that I read it from the start. Cinder is really exciting. Again, the worlds are so cool. They're so different from what you get in a lot of, you know, normal books. And it's just really exciting to read retellings that are diverse, that feature, especially fairy tales that feature like, you know, non-passive versions of the character in question, and especially who can like do really awesome things. There's so much different intrigue going on. There's so much different like shenanigans happening that I think this is a really cool gateway because it kind of shows the way that YA can kind of take twists and turns on different genres or like familiar tales. Number 4 is going to be Ella Enchanted, and I mean, this is a classic. I think like I read this like way long ago, and even then it was not a new book. Ella Enchanted is about this girl named Ella who, this is also another Cinderella retelling actually, who has a curse put on her. It's supposed to be a blessing, but it turns out to be a curse. She has to obey any command that's put on her. And yeah, just like in Cinderella, her stepsisters and stepmother kind of quickly realize this and use it to gain their own advantage. At the same time, Cinderella meets a prince, and yeah, she also cannot pursue the prince the way that she might want to because she has to obey everything. And so a lot of the book is her kind of like figuring out this curse, figuring out like her place, you know, basically told what to do her whole life. And I just love this book so much. I have not read it in a while, but I think it's just one of the classics and should always be a classic. It's so good. The writing in this book is really funny. Ella herself is a really cool character to kind of get to know. So yeah, I just highly recommend it. I feel like we should all be reading it. I feel like it should be in curriculums. And the last one is The Thief from the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner. I actually did not read The Thief first. I read The Queen of Atolia first, which is the second book. I did not realize it was part of the series. I just read it and it was fun, so you can read it standalone. But again, if you like those kind of like plotty, political intrigue-y, Game of Thrones-y kind of books, this series is like should be right up your alley. The Thief kind of like takes place in between the tensions of two kingdoms that have their own queens, and it's just like a lot of, again, I love things that are like leverage the TV show, so this is maybe in line with my Six of Crows recommendation, but there's just like all of these like weird like hijinks going on where people are conning each other and kind of trying to trick each other, and you don't really know who everybody is, and you the reader are also being deceived, and it's really exciting. I really like reading these kinds of books. It's also incredibly well written. I love the series so much. It is still ongoing. You can start with A Thief, but it's cool because each book in the series kind of tracks a different kingdom and a different character who's important in that kingdom. So you get a lot of different perspectives of the same like geopolitical like shit that's happening. There is also a lot of romance, so if you like romance, this is a lot of fun. Queen of Atolia is kind of the one where it happens the most, but it does build up more in the other books between different characters, and it's interesting to see how these romances are also related to the intrigue that's going on. I think it's a great series. If you've read it, like definitely let me know, because I think this is a series that everyone should totally be reading. Yeah, so that's my top 5 Wednesday, last for this month. Bye.